And let me clarify, I don't speak as any citizen of any country, or for that matter, I'm belonging to any organization. I'm a scholar, and therefore my role is, I'm a scholar who's interested in issues of human rights and politics, and therefore my views are something that privileges people and humans over territory and states. That's my political ideology, if you may. Now, when we look at Maqbool Bhatt, I mean, and I'm not focusing on what should the MP do and what you should do, you know better. But let me start with, I mean, what was his message? So if those of you who saw the first 10-15 minutes and those of you who see the rest of it, I know because we had screened this movie at our university yesterday. The message is very simple. This person was asking for freedom. He was asking for self-determination. So the basic message we have to take back is, why was he killed? So we'll come to why was he killed and why was his body treated the way it's being treated. But the basic message is of freedom, inalienable rights of people to determine for themselves. Now, if you notice, he also said, I don't care about UN. Now, one of the problems with Kashmiri movement in general, and specifically British Kashmiri movement have been, is a lot of focus on UN resolution. Now, UN resolution is very clear, India or Pakistan. Now, if you watch what he said and what he says later, his entire ideology, it's very clear. It's people who decide, and his preference would be independence. Now, if we are insisting on UN resolution, then in a sense we are also going against Maqbool Bhatt's own ideology. So we have to keep that in mind. Now, I'm not even making a judgment, it's right or wrong, but that's what it is, so to keep in mind. So message is of freedom and self-determination from both India and Pakistan. And that message is there. When you look at his life, you're right, I mean, he was, before he was arrested and killed and everything by India, and he was declared to be an enemy agent in India, he was also declared to be an Indian agent in Pakistan. So his life, in a sense, shows you the tragedy of many Kashmiris. Indians don't trust them, Pakistanis actually don't trust them, but both of them claim that they belong to them, but both of them will not give them the option of independence from both. Now, Indian occupied you see very clearly, I mean, it's more blatant. Even in terms of Pakistan occupied, Azad Jammu and Kashmir, I mean, I only look at constitution for that matter. And what puzzles me is that constitution makes it very clear, and I in fact compared the constitution of Indian Jammu and Kashmir and the Pakistan Azad Jammu and Kashmir, and the constitution very clear. Both of them insist that the elected leaders have to work towards accession to Pakistan and, in this case, with India. The only difference is the Azad Jammu and Kashmir insists that the leader, the elected leader, has to be Muslim. Now, for me, that's also a problem. You know why? Because we can't insist that we want right to self-determination of all Jammu and Kashmir, then claim that it has to be a Muslim leader only, because Jammu and Kashmir is not a Muslim state alone. The state of all Kashmir, and we say Kashmir includes Jammus, Baltis and Ladakhis and all others. And therefore, the problem with a narrow notion of focus on UN or India or Pakistan resolution is it ignores large number of Kashmiris and what they want. Now, when you look at death, the way he was killed, execution, sadly, I mean, it was clear that one particular Indian diplomat was killed in the UK, and so within 2 or 3 days, Maqbool Bhatt was hanged. Now, this knee-jerk reaction of states that someone gets killed, they want to calm down the public outrage and they're going to hang people. You'll be familiar with that in South Asia, I don't need to say, in both countries, and that is the tragedy of Kashmir, that it's occupied by 2 very cruel kind of states. Now, in this case of body not being given back, I mean, there is no explanation. We can see, I mean, there is an explanation, that they feel that he can be a very strong symbol for Kashmiri movement, and therefore they will not give the body back. So whatever pressure we put, and it should be easy, but we are assuming that Indian state is humane state. That's a big assumption. And I have a feeling that, I'm not saying we should campaign, even I very much, I would encourage this kind of campaign, but we have to keep in mind that it is a state that's a colonial state. Colonial state which colonizes people and colonizes territory, and that is the nature of the state. So in this case, when you look at death, the death execution is not extraordinary. That's the kind of execution India does. That's the kind of execution Pakistan does. That's the kind of execution many states, including US and Iran and China do, right? So what makes it is that the body is not given back, because it gives a message to Kashmir. We will not only control your body when you live, we will also control your body when you're dead. And that is the message that India gave. So it brings in the wider issue of, but why would India do, and what's the kind of policy India adopts in Kashmir? It's a policy of dehumanization. Yes, Kashmir is an integral part of India. Kashmiris don't matter. At best, they can sing and dance, be happy, be very colorful, but they don't really matter if they start asking for rights. So what are the different kinds of dehumanizations? First, killing is one. 1 lakh, up to 1 lakh people that are killed is another, but that's one obvious form. We talked of enforced disappearance, up to 8 to 10,000 people have been disappeared. Now, of course, that leads to phenomena of such so-called half-widows, in terms of women who don't know whether their husbands are alive or dead, so whether they are widows or not. You have cases of rape as tool of warfare, as Dalit pointed out. That was not only taking place, let's say, in Khonan Pushpura, very marked incident, but also in other forms. There are cases of torture, there are cases of sexual violence, often against male Kashmiris. That's never brought out for various reasons. So there's the torture. In a sense, the Kashmiri body is a tortured body, the killed body, the dehumanized body, the occupied body. And the overall message, I mean, the way I look at it is because it is living under occupation. Something else this movie shows very well is the notion, I mean, what is Kashmiri culture? Let's say for people who don't know much. It will give you a message also of very interesting notion of Kashmiriyat, Sufism, and also secularism of certain kind. I'm not talking secularism in the way we understand, but secularism because later you will see that there are the Sikhs who are helping out, and she goes to Sikh Gurudwara, right? So all those things. Kashmir has never been about Hindus or Pandits, it has never been about Muslims, and of course one of the dehumanization, I forgot to mention, and I'm often accused of forgetting it, is the exodus of more than 200 to 300,000 Kashmiri Pandits from the land, and we cannot ignore that. So when you talk of the deaths, we should also have to remember that tragedy. Now the big tragedy of Kashmir is, let's say when you took the example of the Pandits and the brutalization and killing and torture of Kashmiri Muslims mainly, they both are put into competition. So India or Indian nationalists say, what about the Pandits? And therefore, all the violence against Muslims are justified. Now, for me, and of course, Pandit, and then Kashmiri Muslims, some of them will say, but oh, at least Pandits got alive. They got some kind of concession in Delhi. Oh no, they live a nice, luxurious life. The point is, no luxury can compensate for being removed from your home. So what is required is for Kashmiris on both sides. I'm not talking India-Pakistan side now, or Indian-occupied Pakistan. I'm talking Pandits and Muslims, for instance. For them to work together, to recognize that they have common tragedy. Different causes often, but common tragedy. So that is the tragedy of Kashmir. Now the final point I'll make here is, when you look at the movie and I look at it, in that process, we have to work, or you have to, all of us have to work to retain that Kashmiri culture, Kashmirian, which is a deeply pluralistic culture. If we change demography of Jammu and Kashmir, make it more Hinduized, it goes against Kashmiri heritage. If we change the demography in some form of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, Gilgit-Baltistan, we go against the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. So it is very important that that plurality is maintained. Now, who will liberate? Because we don't have the luxury of going and fighting all the time. Fighting doesn't help. We have seen in 1990s, India was at its weakest. Pakistan was its strongest in some sense in early 1990s. Remember, India's ally had collapsed, Soviet Union. Pakistan ally US was well flourishing. In all that context, still India managed to crush Kashmiri armed insurgency, because we are talking here of people versus huge states, states that have immense power and military power. So I don't think violence is an answer. So therefore, what are the ways out? I do think there are creative ways out, including the kind of movie that Talat has made along with the Kashmiri Fahad Shah, who is based in Kashmir. Creative things where you go beyond trying to appeal to them. It's important to appeal, by the way, I'm not questioning it, but appeal and try to work with people on the ground, try to bring people of all sides together without preaching what's right and what's wrong. Of course, the biggest challenge you're going to face is, are you talking of only Azadi from India? Are you going to talk about Azadi from India and Pakistan? Are you going to talk of Azadi from whole idea of nationalism? But these are debates I feel that has to be had, but it needn't lead to a situation where you never agree. So for instance, I'll tell you my own experience. I get accused of working with Pakistani agents because I talk of Azadi. So I'm seen as very separate, someone who supports separatists. But I also get accused, interestingly, of being part of a conspiracy which is anti-Pakistan because I talk of Azadi. I talk of Azadi from both. So a very interesting phenomenon where different sides accuse me of conspiracy for either diluting the Indianness or diluting the entire Pakistan. But the fact of the matter, I do feel from my own experience on the ground in Kashmir Valley, and meeting them and also on social network, that most people would want a dignified life. They may or may not, Azadi means freedom and we cannot dilute that freedom. And when you look at Maqbul Bhatt, he asked, who will liberate? He said, we will liberate, not the UN, not the US. So it's very important therefore for all Kashmiris of all the kinds, including all parts of Jammu and Kashmir, to work together to try to liberate themselves, knowing fully well that they're dealing with very strong states, and therefore there is no option for dignified living but Azadi. And Azadi for someone to do, it could be Azadi within the state, Azadi from the state, Azadi from both states. That's for you all to decide. But something else I'll point out in the end is, when we look at Kashmir, British Kashmir diaspora, I'm an outsider, right? There's a lot of strength you have, and I do feel that the question of, but you are not Kashmiri. In fact, many of my Kashmiri students don't identify themselves as Kashmiri. So I end up saying Kashmir, and they say, well, I don't know, my father never told me, my mother never told me. So I do feel that the generation, which is some of your generation, had a duty. I know you had a lot of struggle here, but you had the duty to transmit a certain Kashmiri culture and identity into your next. Sometimes you succeeded, sometimes you. That has to be done. Involve more young people and look at the room. How many women do you see? That is, I don't think it's irrelevant. It is relevant because you do need to challenge certain prejudices in the own society, because if you want Azadi from India, if you want Azadi from Pakistan, there has to be an internal Azadi that includes rights of minority and rights of women and right of equality within the state. On that note, I'll thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you, Dr. Shah. That was excellent perspective. Is there anybody who's got any questions for for either of us or for Dr. Shah before we go back to the movie? And there may be other questions. But if there's anybody else that has got any suggestions that you want to make that we need to take on board, now is the time to do that.
A couple of years ago, Jacob approached Lord Avery, who is assistant in order to get the remains of the body. So he suggested that we contact his immediate family, which we did. But unfortunately, we still haven't heard nothing from them, but they refused to sort of respond altogether. Who? The Indian government.
The government, right.
Yeah. So basically, how do we, how to break this deadlock? I mean, like you said, we went to the Indian High Commissioner with some other members up, but they refused to sort of, talk. I mean, how can we sort of can we get some third party in, or I mean, it's like.
Is that a question?
No, it's a question.
Open question.
In fact, look, as sometimes being occupied and marginalized, we don't have, or you don't have the luxury of choosing only one way. So I think campaigning with government is important. I do think, for instance, that MPs getting involved does put pressure. The fact that India retaliates in a very strong manner will tell you that it does care. So coming from MPs, it's important. Government, not really, the British government is not going to say anything. If Obama could not utter the K word when he went to Kashmir twice, went to India twice, you can't expect much from the government, but at least MPs can do it. I knew that I don't think have been tried in the past, at least from this perspective. If, as George Galloway pointed out, right, that if you focus on this specific subject, then trying to build network with, for instance, Indian civil society. I know, for instance, a lot, not a lot, but quite a few, not only prominent, but very passionate Indians who care about human rights in Kashmir and would critique their own state. So this kind of issue is something that would appeal to a lot of Indian civil society members also. So maybe the way to approach is try to build network with them and try to say it's a question of justice. And therefore, this is how Indian state has treated one that it claimed was its own. I don't know what exact the claim was, the enemy agent, but the fact is Jammu and Kashmir subject, which means Indian subject according to India, right? So make use of that. I do think that help working with Indian civil societies may be more helpful. Or well, will be something.
Okay.